So I'm sure you guys saw that last week there was the XDefiant open beta, and I played a heap of game time over that week, or more specifically about 3 or 4 days of it actually being live, and I absolutely loved the beta and just the game in general so far. But today we're actually going to be going through 5 things that I didn't like about it, going over some sort of criticisms of the game so far, and talking about what I hope is essentially better once the game actually launches. I'm keen to hear if you guys do want to see more XDefiant content on the channel as we get closer to launch. It is meant to be launching in late summer, so that is essentially within the next few months. However, there isn't actually a specific launch date yet. But yeah, if you guys are keen on more XDefiant content, be sure to let me know down in the comments, and also make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on those notifications. But with that being said, let's jump right into it. So the first thing that I kind of had an issue with in the open beta was pretty much just the UI and the UX. Now, mostly what I had an issue with is pretty much the layout of the UI, and I'm more specifically talking about the actual HUD. It felt very dated. It was very large on the screen, and to me it kind of felt like it was from, I don't know, the mid to late 2010s, for example, a game that came out in 2015 rather than a game that's coming out in 2023. There was a whole lot of information on the screen. There was a ton of stuff that I had to pay attention to, and although part of it is probably just because it's a new game and obviously you always have to get used to new UI, but yeah, it did feel like there was a hell of a lot going on the screen with just the same amount of information that any other shooter puts out there, with a lot less actually going on your screen. Now, as I said in previous videos, I don't know if there is actually settings that can pretty much scale down your HUD, so that is probably a fix right there if that is possible. But as I said in that video as well, I think any user interface that you have to actually go and change, it's just not designed well. It should look pretty much good and work perfectly from the get-go. You shouldn't have to go and change that yourself. So that is one thing I had an issue with. It's not the end of the world, and it's hardly the worst looking UI that I've ever seen either. But yeah, that was one thing that I noticed straight away. It kind of felt like I was playing like a Call of Duty game from like 2013 or something like that, rather than, yeah, a 2023 shooter that's meant to be kind of going up against those games like Call of Duty and Battlefield. Now, the next thing that I didn't really enjoy all that much was to do with the movement. Now, the movement overall, I don't actually think was terrible, and for the most part, I think it was actually pretty solid, but there were certain parts of the movement that I thought were a little bit clunky, mostly in terms of just feeling a little bit sticky in some areas. Now, what I mean by sticky is that essentially any action you took outside of literally just sprinting head first into the battle, it kind of felt like there was a lot of downside to doing any of those actions. For example, sliding or jumping or anything like that. It feels as though if you enter a slide, then once you try to get out of that slide and get back into a sprint, it just kind of took way too long to get into that action. So that was something that I definitely had an issue with. It felt like it was, like I said, a little bit sticky in some areas, but overall I think the movement, just in terms of the speed of it and the ability to get around the map and stuff like that, I think was pretty good for the most part. So it's mostly just a few little tweaks there. It's not like the overall movement sucked, because if it did, I honestly think the game would not be enjoyable whatsoever. Now, the next thing on the list is something that I actually have a very, very big issue with, and it kind of sounds a little bit nitpicky, but I just have a bit of PTSD from the 2019 or 2020 days of Warzone, and this was the incendiary rounds that came from the cleaner faction. Now, they're honestly just annoying. They're not even that overpowered or anything like that. They just annoy me, and I don't know if it's just me that feels that way towards incendiary rounds, but anything in the game that just annoys you, you get hit with an incendiary round, and yeah, like I said, it doesn't deal that much damage, but it's kind of just in your face and you're burning and you're constantly taking damage, even though you're kind of like behind cover, so it just confuses you. It's just a bit like, what the hell, where am I taking damage from? Any little thing like that that is just annoying, I personally just hate that being in a shooter. Realistically, anything that kind of does like passive damage, unless it's like an incendiary grenade, for example, that's a little bit different, because that's its sole purpose. You throw the grenade on the ground and it kind of deals constant damage, but when that is coming from bullets, for example, that just does not make sense. It's just so annoying to me personally, and so, like I said, it's a little bit nitpicky, that one, but I've got some genuine PTSD from playing Warzone. The days of everyone running around with the incendiary shotguns, I just absolutely hate incendiary rounds, and especially also when Vanguard got integrated into Warzone as well, that was even worse. Literally everyone was running around with like MP40s with incendiary rounds, so it could just be me having PTSD, or it could be a legitimate thing that I think a lot of people feel. But either way, I kind of hope they reduce the actual like damage and the, I guess, in your face element of the incendiary rounds, or better off just literally removing it in general. But I don't think they'll do that, and that is definitely not exciting for the future of the game. Now, the next thing on the list is actually kind of a weird one, and this is to do with the loadouts. Now, I personally felt as though the loadouts are kind of missing something, and I don't know what I mean by that in terms of what they are specifically missing. How it currently is that you obviously have your main weapon weapon, you then have the secondary weapon, and then you've got your gadget. Now, most other games out there in terms of shooters, they generally have multiple types of gadgets. There's then also like the perk system and stuff like that. Now, I know it doesn't really make sense to have the perks in this game because they've got the faction system and that kind of replaces that, and then also kind of takes that away from your loadouts because you're picking the faction and then creating your loadout. So that's probably part of it, is that it feels as though like they've taken the perks away and put it somewhere else, but that's not necessarily just what I mean. I don't need there to be like actual perks. I don't even need there to be multiple gadgets or anything like that. It's just that the loadout system did feel very like bare bones. It felt like a very, very early shooter where, yeah, you literally just had a weapon, a secondary, and a grenade. And so if they can try to add something in there, not even like a genuine perk system, but just like you can choose a different bonus or something per loadout, for example, just something extra in there that kind of adds to the variety of every single player, because how it currently feels is that everyone's going to kind of end up running pretty much the same types of loadouts, and I don't think that's a good thing in any shooter, to be honest. Now, my last issue with the game, which is something that is very easy to fix, luckily, is to do with the spawns. I think that there are multiple different like elements to the spawns that definitely are in need of a bit of extra work. One, you do tend to spawn very far away from the action a lot of the time, which is something that I find very annoying personally. It's different when it's a game like Battlefield, for example, because that's a bit of a longer game, and obviously the maps are so big that it kind of makes a bit more sense. Whereas in a game like Call of Duty, which obviously this game is trying to kind of base itself off, when you spawn too far away, it just feels like you're so far out of the action, and then you've run all that way, and then half the time you just die anyway, and you've got to do it all over again. So firstly, I think they should make the spawns just a little bit closer to the action, and then on the other side of it too, I think they need to be a bit more dynamic, because also it felt very, very easy to spawn trap people in domination, pretty much how it was in the old Call of Duty games, where if you just capture A and B, for example, and just literally sit halfway between B and C and don't push into their spawn point, they're just going to keep spawning at C, and then you can just literally trap them and they can never get out of there. So I think the spawns need a little bit of work, but like I said, that is something that's a little bit easier to fix because it is just choosing locations rather than something that is like entirely baked into the game. And so hopefully they do take a look at that. I've seen a lot of people saying the same thing, and it seems as though they are really listening to feedback so far, so I'm sure they will eventually change that. But yeah, in the beta, it definitely did not feel very good at all. So those are 5 things that I don't really like about XDefiant so far. Like I said, overall though, I do really enjoy the game. I'm actually really excited for it to launch. It's very rare for me to feel this way towards like an arcade shooter, because honestly, the recent Call of Duty games just do not do it for me. I kind of grew up in the gaming scene on Call of Duty. That's where I pretty much started playing shooters, and I absolutely love the old school Call of Duty feeling. But like I said, recent CODs just haven't hit that sort of peak Call of Duty feeling for me, but this game definitely scratched that itch just a little bit, while also throwing in its own little elements to make it feel a little bit unique as well. So I am very keen for the game. There is a lot of stuff they need to address because it is obviously their first time entering into the shooter sort of genre, and therefore there's always going to be stuff they need to improve on. But either way, I am keen to hear your thoughts on all the stuff you guys did or didn't like about the XDefiant beta, so be sure to leave your thoughts down below. And like I said, if you want to see more XDefiant content on the channel, be sure to let me know down in the comment section. Thank you all very much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll see you all out there on the battlefield.